One of the most difficult parts of the golf swing to learn and ultimately to manage is the movement of the wrists throughout the swing. Because the wrists can move in such a large range of motion, they could take this golf club on a seemingly infinite number of different directions. But which one is right? And is there a wrist motion that's consistently demonstrated by good players and consistently violated by higher handicap golfers? And the answer is yes. There is a movement that takes place between the backswing and the downswing, the transition of the golf swing, that is a strong indicator in terms of skill, whether you're going to be a good golfer or a poor golfer. Master the move that the pros are making in their transition and you too can become a more elite ball striker. To help you really see what's going on at the wrist level throughout this video, I'm going to be using the HackMotion wrist sensor, which will be able to show you in detail what's really going on. In order for you to see what's going on, you just need to understand a couple of very simple movements that this lead wrist will make. I'm wearing the HackMotion on my left wrist, which is my lead wrist as a right-handed golfer, and I really just need you to understand two possible ranges of motion, two possible movements. The wrist from this fairly neutral condition can either move into flexion, which is this movement of the hand inwards towards my body, moving the palm up and in towards me. That's known as flexion, and that creates this bowed condition to the back of the wrist. And the opposite movement in the same plane of motion would be to move the hand away from me. This would be extension. So you have extension with the cupping in the back of the wrist, and you have flexion, moving the wrist in the opposite direction and creating this bowed condition. And in golf, flexion would create an environment where we would typically close the club face, and extension would do the opposite. Extension would tend to open the club face. I've covered this before in previous videos, and you do not need to own a HackMotion in order to improve your wrist movements. It just helps you to see what's going on. One final time there, just to show you on the extension flexion piece, if I was to move this wrist into extension, which is the cupping of the wrist as I just described, you'll notice how the club face opens. That's a move typically associated with high handicap golfers who slice the ball and don't hit the ball very far. The opposite of extension is flexion. That's me twisting the wrist in the opposite direction. And you'll notice there how now the club face looks very different. The club face is now turned or twisted down towards the ground, and that type of wrist condition would be associated with much stronger ball strikers, better players, low handicaps and professional players. You may not know that you're twisting your wrists every single time you swing, but I can assure you that you are. The problem for most of you is that you don't realize that twisting is happening and you just allow the swings to continue on as they are. Good golfers have learned to twist this club in a way that's beneficial to them, that helps them. Higher handicap golfers, if you're struggling with your wrist movement, you've likely learned a movement that's just not very efficient. However, because it's become familiar to you, you just keep repeating and repeating and repeating. You don't know what you don't know. This video is going to show you exactly what you should do with this wrist in order to improve your ball striking. So while there could potentially be an infinite number of ways that you could move this club and move your wrists, what we see among the best ball strikers is that as they reach the top of the swing and begin to swing down towards the ball, the lead wrist moves towards flexion in almost every single good ball striker, regardless of the number of degrees of extension or flexion that a golfer might have at the top. And that number can vary from player to player based on how they grip the club, how they align the face, and some of their individual swing tendencies. Despite all of that, regardless of the number that's reading in the HackMotion at the top of the swing, the first movement down is for this lead wrist to move towards flexion. If you can understand that motion, what it feels like, and how that can help you to put this club head and this club face into a powerful position and a great delivery position, you can improve your golf immediately. There's a couple of great drills that you can do in order to help you to feel this. One of them is incorporated into the HackMotion app itself. The motorcycle drill is one whereby you would get to the top, and as you start down, you would twist or turn your wrist as if you were twisting on the throttle of a motorcycle. So you go to the top, and as you start down, you would twist that lead wrist, and at the same time, the trail wrist is going to work in a similar fashion. You're going to turn or twist the grip. This comes back to the point that I was making earlier, which is you're already twisting this club when you swing. You just don't necessarily understand that that's what you're doing because you don't feel a conscious twist. You're just twisting the club in a very natural or familiar way to you, albeit the wrong way. If you want to twist the wrist in the correct way, you're going to need to feel a conscious movement of this twisting. That's exactly what this motorcycle drill is designed to do. As I hit a couple of shots here, I'm also going to bring up the HackMotion graph. I know a number of you have the HackMotion wrist sensor and you've been messaging me about how to use this device more efficiently. I'm going to show you in a second how you can look at the graph on HackMotion, which can seem like a slightly overwhelming picture for you to take in, and show you exactly where to look on that graph to see if you're doing this piece of the swing correctly. So we're going to get to the top. We're going to practice just twisting the motorcycle drill, turning the wrist down and helping us to line that club into a very strong position that's going to allow me to hit the ball very solid, very straight and very far. That felt really good. Felt like it's going to be a draw. Felt like it came right out the middle of the club. That one drew a little bit more, but the length and the distance I've got there is exceptional. I'll show you shortly how the wrist there moved towards flexion in transition. The benefit of doing that is it gets the club head into a stronger position and helps to shallow the club down into the downswing. It gets it into this lovely delivery slot right here where I can just really let the club go and get maximum benefit from all of those pieces. If I wasn't turning the wrist towards flexion in transition, I'd most likely be doing the opposite. I'd be spinning the wrist or spinning the club in the wrong direction. Let's take a look at what that would look like. So at full speed, this is unlikely to look very different, but once I reach the top of my swing, if I was to actually start to twist the wrist towards extension, I'm going to be laying this club face back into an open position. That's then going to lead to me having to make a lot of last minute adjustments and compensations in my swing to try and account for the fact that the club face is now in the wrong spot. So if I go ahead and hit one of these where I make a regular backswing, but as I pull down, I actually twist the club into extension, or twist the wrist into extension, sorry, and I open the club face, you'll see that this produces an extremely different outcome. I would say that felt equally nice off the club face, but I could tell straight away that that ball's going to curve off to the right. It's a much higher shot, much less penetrating, and significantly less distance. That ball's flown a total of 137 yards. The ball before that flew 162. It's an enormous difference in power with the same swing or the same effort that I'm putting into it. Just by understanding how the best players move their wrists in transition, you can really begin to benefit from this powerful wrist movement. And I want to take a look at the graph on HackMotion. For those of you that have the HackMotion wrist sensor, this can be a very valuable lesson in how to use it. For those of you that don't have it, you can still get to see the validation of the graph and show the movement does really exist, because when you're just watching this at full speed, it's very hard to actually know what's really going on. As I pull up the graph on the screen here, we're only going to be looking at one very specific piece. This top of the backswing line where it shows how the club where the club changes direction. It's the point at which the club goes from being into the backswing and starts becoming the downswing, the transition if you like. And on the first shot here where I hit the strong, powerful draw, the ball that actually curved a little bit too much to the left, but was an extremely well compressed, well struck shot that went a long way, you'll notice that immediately following that line where it says the top of the swing, the graph is moving down. That orange line is moving down, and that's towards flexion. You'll see that on the graph. A movement downwards is towards flexion. The movement upwards is towards extension. So you see there in that first shot how immediately from the top of the swing, the first movement the wrist is making is down towards flexion. The graph is moving down towards flexion. The wrist is moving into a stronger position. Contrast that with shot number 2, which is on the screen there, And again, notice the line that's referencing the top of the backswing. Anything to the right of that line is the downswing. And you'll see that as soon as we go past that line, the orange graph is moving up towards extension. That's the complete opposite. That's a huge difference in terms of what that's going to do to the ball. It may not look like much of a difference on the graph because you don't necessarily know what to look for, but the movement in the wrists is huge. The difference in the movement in the wrists is huge, and the difference in how that delivers the club to the ball, as you see, is enormous. Once again, understand this twisting happens, whether you like it or not, whether you feel it or not. If you're getting this wrong, particularly if you're a slicer of the golf ball, moving towards flexion in transition could absolutely be the best movement you ever learn. So one more time, how would you practice that without a HackMotion wrist sensor? Well, you'd just go to the top of your golf swing and start twisting your wrists as if you're twisting the throttle on a motorcycle. Your lead hand or your lead wrist is going to move more towards flexion. We've already talked about that bowed condition. And as that happens, the trail wrist is going to move in the opposite direction. It's going to move closer to extension. That twisting is going to change the orientation of this club face, and the position of this club face during the downswing is going to influence how we deliver this club to the ball. Get this wrong, twist the club towards you, move the face open and the wrist into extension. Now we have to start swinging across the ball, and we're going to get a very different looking result. So practice swinging to the top, and as you start down, putting a conscious twist into this handle, whereby as you stop at P6 where the shaft is parallel to the ground, you'll notice how, number one, your club face should be pointing slightly down towards the ground. That would be a good checkpoint. And number two, at this point in time, your wrist and your forearm are going to be relatively flat. Okay, there's not going to be too much of an angle, certainly not going to be too much of this extension, which you'll see on the HackMotion there is excessively extended. You're going to find that the wrist is pretty close to flat. You'll see that number there is almost at zero. In fact, it is at zero right there. And having it more flexed or turned would actually be closing the face more. So you're controlling the face via the twist. As you come down to P6, look for the wrist to be relatively flat and the club face to be pointing slightly down towards the ground. That's a great checkpoint and a great little pump drill there for you to practice going from the top, twist it down to P6, to the top, twist it down to P6, to the top, twist it down. You see how, as I'm getting to the top close to zero, coming down, increasing the flex. Go to the top, close to zero, coming down, increasing the flex. Close to zero, increasing the flex. Now I can hit one. Pretty similar shot shape to the first one. I didn't quite hit that one as close to the middle as the first one. It was slightly off the bottom of the club, hence the reason why it didn't fly quite as high or quite as far. But the general shape there was similar because I was able to get that club into a strong position. As I've already mentioned, learning good wrist mechanics is one of the greatest skills you could ever learn to improve your golf. It's quite complex at the most sophisticated level, but at a basic level, as a user of the HackMotion and someone who's just looking to improve their golf in a small way, you can make this simple. This today was just about twisting your wrists one way or the other to influence the club face. That's a really simple thing that you could practice, and you could use the ball flight to help you determine whether you're doing too much or too little of something. If you are interested in learning more about the HackMotion, I will put a link in the description of this video where you can learn more. This month of November, they have a huge sale going on, which is going to enable you to get this product at the lowest price you possibly could. So if it's something you've been thinking about, now would be a great time to action on that purchase. So there's an extremely important understanding about how the wrists move in the transition of the golf swing from backswing to follow through. There's a very strong correlation between how you move your wrists in transition and how good a golfer you can be. If you can learn to start moving the lead wrist towards flexion as you pull this club down, you'll likely see a massive improvement not only in your ball striking quality and consistency, but also in how far you hit the ball. If If you did enjoy the video today, guys, can I ask you to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you'd like further education on how the wrists work and specifically how to use HackMotion, then there's a few options available to you. I'm making videos directly for HackMotion, and you can see those on their YouTube channel. They're freely available to you. I'll link that down in the description. Alternatively, if you have a more specific question that you'd like help with, you can reach out to me directly via the online lesson platform that I use, which is called Skillest. Download Skillest, search for my name, and you can send me a message there. I'm helping people on Skillest every single day use their HackMotion device and improve their wrist mechanics. And finally, of course, you can stay right where you are and click on this playlist next. I made this playlist which features multiple videos using HackMotion for wrist training throughout every different part of the game.